Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Zayin, Daf 17 of Masechta Taanis. Friends, you can tell me what Daf Yud Zayin talks about. It's obviously fast, but also talks a shtickle about the Kohanim who worked in the Beis HaMikdash. And right, because our Mishnah talked about that, the Kohanim, well, initially the Mishnah talked about Kohanim and the Anshe Mishmar and the Anshe Maimit and Anshe Base of, about their fasting schedules and how, like, would they fast at all? Would they fast partial days? Things like that. And then once we were talking about the Anshe Mishmar and the Anshe Base of, so then we discussed as well, are they allowed to drink wine? So that's going to get into questions about drinking wine and haircuts and all sorts of things like that. And then at the end we talk about the Megillus Taanis again, a shtickle. So friends, another Gevalig Daf over here of Masechta Taanis. Let's jump in. So it says the Gemara in the second line of the, oh no, wait, one second. We almost skipped a line over here. No, we're talking on the last line of Daf Tezayin Amud Beis. It says the Gemara in Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, all the way to the second line from the bottom. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Lo Yitzarech Lo Mezechronis Chulei. So Yehuda says that you don't say Zechronis and Shofaros, right? The Tanna Kama had said that the first two brachas that of the additional 6 on those last fast days. So the Tanna Kama says that the first two brachas over there of the additional brachas are Zechronos and Shofaros. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no, you don't say Zechronos and Shofaros, you say other psukim. So Amar Rav Ada bin Yafo, who has been to Yafo? My time with Rabbi Yehuda, what's pshat with Rabbi Yehuda l'fishein onim Zechronos v'Shofaros ela Rosh Hashanah v'Yovlos v'Shas Milchama, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the only times you say Zichronos and Shofaros are, of course, on Rosh Hashanah, as well as Yom Kippur of Yovel. We learned in Masechta Rosh Hashanah that Yom Kippur of Yovel is the same as Rosh Hashanah Legabe, blowing the shofar and tefillas, and therefore Zichronos and Shofaros would be on Yom Kippur of Yovel. V'Shas Milchama, and apparently also at the time of war. Rashi says that he's not quite sure where this is from. Lo yadinon mina ispish domer brachos ufsuke malchus zichronos v'shofaros b'shas milchama. So Rashi says he's not exactly sure why necessarily we would say zichronos and shofaros at a time of war, but that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. It continues the Gemara and Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Al Rishonu Omer Mishaones Avram Chulei. All right, fine. So getting into these 6 brachas, Tana. We learn in the Brayse Yesh Machlifin Tzaikel Eliyahu Sfila L'Shmil, that in the Mishnah, so 2 of the brachos were right Shomea Tzeaka, the Eibishter who listens to cries, and there's also Shomea Tefila, he who listens to prayers. So we associated the cries with Shmuel and the prayer with Eliyahu. Now there are those who switch it around. And the Taka say that Tzaika, that the crying out was Eliyahu, and the Tefillah was Taka Shmuel. B'Shlomo, Gabi Shmuel, Ksiv Beit Tefillah, Ksiv Beit Tzaika. By Shmuel, I understand how you could swap it around, because by Shmuel, it says Tefillah, and it also says Tzaika, that Shmuel, when he's praying, he right, it's the reference is both prayer, Tefillah, as well as crying out. Eligab Eliyahu, Tefillah Ksiv, Tzaika Lo Ksiv. But by Eliyahu, it only mentions prayer, right? Aneni Hashem Aneni. It only mentions prayer. It doesn't mention Tzaika. It doesn't mention crying, calling out, crying out to the Eibishter. Aneni Hashem Aneni Lashon Tzaika Hu. To which the Gemara answers, well, when it says Aneni Hashem Aneni, Hashem, please answer me, that is actually Tzaika, crying out. And therefore, okay, so those who say, so there's 2 ways you can understand it. One is that Shmuel is about prayer and Eliyahu is about crying out. The other one is the opposite, that Shmuel is about crying out and Eliyahu is about praying. And, alright, what do you want me to tell you? The 6th bracha is he who answered Jonah when he was inside of a whale. Al Hashvi Su'om Mishana is David Chule, and then the 7th bracha, the next bracha, and the final of the additions is the Eibishter, he who answered David. So, effectively, Gemara Michdei Yonah Basar David v'Shlomo Haba. Yonah, chronologically speaking, was later than David and Shlomo. My time in Makdim Leberesha. So if in fact Yonah chronologically, historically, was later than David and his son Shlomo, so then how come his bracha, we mention him earlier than David and Shlomo in these extra brachas? So Mishum Dibay Lemechtam Rachem Al Haaretz, because the last of the brachas is he who has mercy on the land, and it was during the time of David and Shlomo that the Eibishter had mercy on the land and brought rain. Okay, and we want to end with that, so therefore we end with David and Shlomo, even though technically, historically, Yonah would have come later. Tana Mishum Sumchis Amru, they said the name Sumchus Baruch Mashbil Aramim, that instead of Baruch Merachim Al Haaretz, it's Baruch Mashbil Aramim, who humbles those who are very lofty. Okay, he humbles those who are lofty, lowers that which is very high. All right. Shalosh Taanios Arishonos Anshe Mishmar Misanim V'lo Mashlimin Uah Chulei. So the Mishnah had said that the first three of the fast, so the Anshe Mishmar, the people in the Mishmar, right? The Anshe Mishmar, of course, is the people, right? There were 24 Mishmaros, and each one would serve, in a 1 week shift, and then they were broken up, into 7 Beis Avs, and each Beis Av would serve a different day of the week. Now, so it says Shalosh Taanios Arishonos Anshe Mishmar Misanin V'lo Mashlim and Chulei. So we said that the first 3 fasts, the people in the Mishmar whose week it was to serve, but not necessarily whose day it was to serve, so they would fast, but they just wouldn't complete their fast. Tanar Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, B'pnei Amru Anshe Mishmar Mutarin Lishtos Yain Balelos Avalo Bayomim. How come they said that the people whose Mishmar it is that week, although not necessarily their day within the Mishmar to serve, but it was their week to serve? So how come they said that they are allowed to drink wine at night, avalo bayom, but not during the day? Because let's say there's a lot of work for the people who are working that day, for the Beis Av. So who's going to help them out? The other people from the Mishmar. And therefore, since during the day they might be called upon to help out their brethren who are in the Beis Av that day and have a lot of work to do, so they can't be drinking wine, because then they'll be drunk, and that's bad news to do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash when you're drunk. And therefore, during the day, the Anshe Mishmar, even if it isn't their day to serve, nonetheless they don't drink wine, just in case they're going to be called upon to help out. And how come the people in the Beis Av, right, the people whose day it is to serve in the temple, so that, right, so the Mishmar it's their responsibility that week, and then they're broken into different days. So the people who are serving that specific day, so they're not allowed to drink wine neither during the day nor at night, because they're always busy doing stuff, even at night, right? If any limbs and things that didn't get burnt before the night time, so they could burn all night, and they have to be there making sure that everything's being taken care of. And therefore, the people whose base of it is that day, they don't drink wine at all, not during the day, not at night. Mikan Amu Kokoin Shemakir Mishmarto Umishmer is base of Shalo. So if you have a kohen, if you have a priest, Shemakir Mishmarto, and he knows which family he comes from, right? For example, Yehoyariv was one of the Mishmaros. So if a fellow knows, he has his family lineage, completely, he's misudar. He knows exactly who his father was and who his father's father was, all the way up to, one of the Mishmaros. Umishmer is base of Shlo. And not only that, he also knows what day of the week his family would serve in that Mishmar. But they also kvuin sham, and he knows that his base of is completely intact. I.e., if the Beis Hamikdash should be built immediately, he would know exactly when he's serving the Beis Hamikdash. Also, lishtos yain kol oso ayom so then he's not allowed to drink wine that day. So if he knows that every day, every year, I don't know, and where are we now? I don't know, we're in Kislev. Okay, let's say on the 25th of Kislev, alright? He knows that every year on the 25th of Kislev, he is serving in the temple. And he knows that his family comes from the Mishmar who would serve that week. And not only that, but he knows that, which day of the week it is, whatever it is. He knows when the day of his service falls out. So then he shouldn't be drinking wine at all that entire day. Because if the Beis HaMikdash is built immediately on that day, well then he's going to have to be serving the Beis HaMikdash. And he can't be drunk. If a fellow knows which mishmeres he is in, so therefore he knows which week of the year his family would serve. He just didn't know specifically what day of that week he'd be serving. So v'yodea shebatei avos kvuin sham, and he knows that his family is intact, and he would certainly be called upon to serve in the Beis HaMikdash when it's rebuilt. Also the shtos yain kolosho Shabbos, so he's not allowed to drink, right? He's never allowed to drink wine that week, because he knows that if the Beis HaMikdash will be built in that week, he's going to be called upon to do the service in the temple. And therefore, even nowadays, that week, this fellow would not be allowed to drink any wine. If a fellow does not know which mishmar he comes from, and then Memela, he doesn't know which Beisav he comes from. So therefore, he doesn't know what week of the year his family would be serving. But he knows that his lineage is intact. He knows that when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, he is going to be called upon to do the service in the temple. He doesn't necessarily know what week or what day, but he knows that, he will be serving in the temple. So also lishtos yain kol hashana, so then he's not allowed to drink wine the entire year, because he doesn't know when the week is for that he'll be serving. Maybe it's this week, and maybe the Beis HaMikdash is going to be this week, be built this week. And therefore, if you have a fellow who doesn't know which week it is for his for him to be serving in the temple, so then he can never be drinking any wine, because let's say this is his week and the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt, he's going to have to be available to serve in the temple, and therefore he can't be drunk. Fashnikit. Alright. Rabbi Omer says, Omer Ani says, Rabbi, look, technically, according to me, also the shtos yayin le'olam. Rabbi says, look, I think strictly speaking, a Kohen should never be allowed to drink any wine. But what should I do? Shetakanoso kilkalaso. But what can I do that it's already been so long that the Beis HaMikdash has not yet been rebuilt, right? And therefore, we don't assume that it's going to be built immediately, which is super interesting. I mean, Rashi says, if you look at Rashi, right, the Dibra Masru Rebbe Omer Ani Kohen Aser Chule. So at the very end of the Rashi, right, he says, it's already been many years that the Beis HaMikdash has not returned. And this sort of negative situation, Takanoso, is what allows the Kohanim to drink wine nowadays. And we're not concerned that maybe the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt immediately. But it says, Rebbe, that look, Maker Adin, really, Kohanim should not be drinking wine nowadays, because who knows, when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, they may end up serving, who knows, maybe the Mishmaros will be changed, or maybe all the Kohanim, they'll need all the Kohanim, whatever it is, they might be serving the temple, and therefore, technically speaking, Kohanim nowadays should not be drinking wine at all, ever, because when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, they might be needed to serve in the temple. However, says Rashi, that according to Rebbe, the fact of the matter is, it's already been a long time, and the Beis HaMikdash has not yet been rebuilt, and because it has not yet been rebuilt, he says, "L'shema yibane lo chashinan." We don't assume that it's just going to appear suddenly. It's been this long, and the Beis HaMikdash hasn't come. We don't assume that it's going to appear suddenly, and therefore, even though technically speaking, Kohanim should not be drinking wine nowadays, because if the Beis HaMikdash is immediately rebuilt, they may be called upon to serve. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have to assume that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt immediately, and therefore like this second, and therefore the Kohanim nowadays do drink wine. Super, super, super interesting. Now, the Gemara is going to point out that that's Rebbe's opinion, but the Chacham argue upon him. But anyways, super interesting stuff. Amar Abaye says, Abaye, K'man Shasu Idna Kana Chamra Ki Rebbe. Says Abaye, the Kohanim nowadays who drink wine, why are they allowed to drink wine? Like Rebbe, who says that Takanosu Kalaso, that the fact that the Beis Hamikdash has not yet been rebuilt for so long, we don't need to assume that it's going to be rebuilt immediately, and therefore Kohanim are allowed to drink wine nowadays. The Mishnah had said that the people in the Mishmar and the people in the Maimud, so they're not allowed to get a haircut or to do their laundry that entire week that they're doing their service in the temple. But on Thursday they're allowed to get a haircut and to do laundry. Out of the honor of the Sabbath. My time, what's pshat with this whole thing? How come the Anshe Mishmar and the Anshe Maimid are not allowed to get haircuts and do laundry? So Amarav Bar Bachana Amar B'Yochanan Kedei Shelo Yichabsu Kedei Shelo Yikonsu LeMishmartim Kshem Menuvalim, so that they don't come to the serving the temple to do their service when they're like not in tip top shape, when they need to get a haircut, like me, right? And therefore we say, look, you're not allowed to get a haircut that week for Friday. Memela you're allowed to for Shabbos, but we say you're not allowed to get a haircut any of the other days, so that if you realize that you need to get a haircut, then you'll prioritize it and you'll get a haircut before you show up at the temple. So if we say that once you show up at the temple you can't get a haircut, so that people will do it in advance. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbi in preparation. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbi taught, Melech mistape b'chol yom. A king taka gets a haircut every single day. Doesn't he have things he has to be doing? I don't know. I guess not. Kohen Gadol me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos. A Kohen Gadol gets a haircut every Friday. Kohen Hedjet achas l'shloshim yom. A regular Kohen gets a haircut every 30 days. Melech mistape b'chol yom. So we said that a king gets a haircut every single day. My time, how come? Because the pasuk says that you should see a king when he's glorious in his beauty, and therefore we always want him to be beautiful, so he gets a haircut every single day. All right, but again, I don't know. Doesn't he have other things to do? Maybe he's busy doing stuff while he's getting a haircut. Kohen Gadol me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos. The high priest, the Kohen Gadol, gets a haircut every Friday. My time outcome, I'm Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchok, Hol Mishmaros Mischachos. Since the Mishmaros are changing, right? The Mishmaros would change every Shabbos. And therefore, the Mishmar that's now starting on Shabbos, so they're going to be seeing the Kohen Gadol. And therefore, you want them to see the Kohen Gadol when he's in tip-top shape. And therefore, every Friday he gets a haircut in preparation for meeting and seeing the Mishmar that's coming the next day. Kohen Hedjet achas l'shloshim yom minolan. How do we know that a regular Kohen needs to get a haircut every 30 days? As the pasuk says, asir pera minazir, because we learn it out from a nazir. Ksiv hacha, it says over here by the Beis Hamikdash, v'roshim lo yigalechu, that the Kohanim, it says by the Kohanim, that the Kohanim should not shave. Ufera lo yishalechu, and they also shouldn't, right, meaning they shouldn't like shave bald, they also shouldn't grow out their hair long. Uksiv hasom, and it says by a nazir, kadoshiyeh gadel peres sarosha, that it will be holy, this fellow who is growing out his hair. So therefore, it says pera by a kohen, and it says pera by a nazir. Malahalon shloshim afkan shloshim. Just like by a nazir, we're talking about 30 days, right? That the stam oath, Nazirite oath, is for 30 days. So therefore, also when it comes to a kohen getting a haircut, where it also says pera, so we're talking about every 30 days. For nazir gufa minalan, how do you know that a nazir, we're talking about at least 30 days? Rav Masna, stam nazir shloshim yom minalan, says Rav Masna, how do we know that a regular Nazirite oath is for 30 days. Amar Kala Pasuk says Yihye, right? That it says Kadosh Yihye Gadol Peres Arosho. So Yihye Bigamatrit Slasanave. That if you do the math, Yihye in its numerical equivalent is 30, and therefore Stam Naziris is 30 days, and therefore if it says Pera by Nazir and it says Pera by Kohen, so Memela Kohen should get a haircut every 30 days. Now Papa says to Abai, maybe this is what the pasuk is saying. That maybe the Kohen shouldn't grow his hair whatsoever. Right? When it says Rosh lo yigalechu ufer lo yishalechu, that they shouldn't grow out their hair. Maybe they shouldn't grow out their hair at all. Not even 30, right? Meaning, not that after 30 days they get a haircut. Maybe they shouldn't let their hair grow whatsoever. If it would say that they shouldn't let it grow, then sure, maybe they shouldn't let it grow at all. But when it says that this long hair they shouldn't have, so so let it sort of grow long, but right after 30 days, which I guess isn't that much time, but like let it grow out of shtickle, and then once it's grown out of shtickle, then lo lishalechu, don't let it go further than that. So basically, every 30 days, a kohen gets a haircut. Alright, every 30 days. I don't know how often I get haircuts, probably not every 30 days. So effect, the Gemara, if that's the case, so then this should apply nowadays as well. Right? Every 30 days, Kohanim should get haircuts. Dumri d'shasuya yayin. So the Gemara says, well, it's similar to drinking wine. Mashasuya yayin bisman bia uda asu shlo bisman bia shari. Well, drinking wine. So when they would go to the Beis Hamikdash, so the Kohanim weren't allowed to drink wine. Outside of that, they're allowed to drink wine. So here also, right, as long as there's a Beis Hamikdash, so then we have to maintain the Kohanim not growing out their hair. However, nowadays there's no Beis Hamikdash, they're not going to the Beis Hamikdash to serve, and therefore they are allowed to grow out their hair. So just like nowadays Kohanim are allowed to drink wine, they're also allowed to grow out their hair if they wish. Fine. But one second. We have a Brisa that says Rebbe Omer Ani Kohanim Asurin L'Shtos Yayin La'olam. That says Rebbe, look, really I think that Kohanim should not be allowed to drink wine at all. But Avamaya says Shetakanosu Kalkalaso. But what should I do? That the fact that it's taken so long for the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt is means that we don't necessarily have to assume that it's going to be rebuilt immediately, and that the Kohanim are allowed to drink wine. Therefore, nowadays, V'omer Abai, and says Abai, K'manshoso idno Kohane Chamer, and like who do the Kohanim drink wine nowadays? Ki Rebbe, like Rebbe, who says that, right? Takanoso Kakaloso. Michlal Drabanan Asrei, implying that the rabbis would say that you're not allowed to drink wine nowadays. Interesting. My time out, here you bana Beis Hamikdash, because the Beis Hamikdash will hopefully be rebuilt very soon. And we're going to need somebody who is who's going to be able to do the avoda, and we won't have people ready to do the avoda if they're fashniket, if they're drunk. So therefore, the rabbis would argue that Kohanim nowadays are not allowed to drink wine, because if the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt immediately, then we might need some Kohanim. So okay, fine. But efshar the misaper v'ayo, they can always just get a haircut and go, right? So meaning, right, we had asked that, well, if the pasuk says that that Kohanim shouldn't grow out their hair, so then even nowadays they shouldn't grow out their hair, right? So we said, well, it's just like wine, just like that nowadays the wine prohibition doesn't apply anymore, so also the haircut prohibition doesn't apply anymore. To which you say, but one second, whose opinion is it who says that the wine prohibition doesn't apply anymore? That's just Rebbe. The rabbis say that the wine prohibition does apply nowadays, and therefore Kohanim should not be allowed to drink wine nowadays. To which the Gemara said, right, and if that's the case, that they're not allowed to drink wine nowadays, then maybe also the haircut rules apply as well. Kohanim should not be allowed to grow out their hair more than 30 days. To which the Gemara answers, wait, when it comes to drinking wine, I understand why Kohanim cannot drink wine nowadays. Because if the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt immediately, we're going to need Kohanim, and if they're all fashniket, we're not going to have Kohanim. Whereas getting a haircut, that's irrelevant because you can always just get a haircut quickly, right? The Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. Quickly you run who's the guy over here who cuts my hair whenever I go, which is not that often? Moti. So you go to Moti, and he'll give you a haircut, and you go to the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore it's not a concern. If that's the case, Shisu Yain, Nami Afshad Dagani Porta Va'ayil. But drinking wine, you can always just sleep a shtickle, and then you'll be fine, right? So, I mean, technically speaking, nowadays, you should be able to drink wine if the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt immediately. So the Kohen could just sleep a shtickle, and then the wine will wear off, and you can go serve in the Beis HaMikdash. That if you take a walk, or if you go to sleep a shtickle, so it weakens the wine. So therefore, I don't understand. I mean, we're saying that nowadays you're not allowed to drink wine. We want to say, yeah, that's because you're going to be fashniket, you won't be able to serve in the temple. But that's not the case by haircut, because you can always just get a haircut and then go to the temple. But if that's the case, then you can also just sleep a shtickle, let the wine wear off, and then you can go to the temple. So the Gemara says that's not really a good point, because Lav Miyitmar Allah, wasn't it taught about it? The whole sleeping thing only works if you only drink a revius. But that's not that much. But if you drink more than a revius, if you drink more than a revius, then certainly sleeping and going on a walk is only going to make things worse. Alright, fine. So therefore, that's why Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine nowadays, because if they drink too much, so then they won't be able to serve in the temple when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. So therefore, that's why the Rabbanan would say that you're not allowed to drink, that Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine nowadays. But in terms of haircuts, they can always just get a haircut quickly and then go serve in the temple. Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, Shesu yain de machle avoda. Rav Ashi wants to argue, look, if you do the avoda, if you do the service in the temple when you're drunk, fashnikit, so then the avoda doesn't work. It doesn't count. If a Kohen does the service in the temple when he's fashnikit, so then it's like nothing happens. It's irrelevant. The service doesn't work. So Gazbu Rabban, and therefore the rabbis say that even nowadays you're not allowed to drink wine, because wine's a big deal. If when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, if you're fashnikit and you go and do the service, it's not going to work. So therefore, we don't want you to drink wine nowadays, according to the rabbis. However, when it comes to having a shtickle long hair, that even if you did the avoda with long hair, even though you shouldn't, it still works. So lo gazbu rabbanan, so the rabbis weren't as concerned. And they said, look, you can grow out your hair nowadays, because worse comes to worse, even in the event if you do the service in the temple with longer hair, it'll still work. If we have a kasha, she'ein b'misa. These are those that you get the death by misa b'dei shamayim. Shesuya yain, if a fellow serves in the temple when he's fashnikit, ufuay rosh, or if he serves in the temple with long hair. Yishlama shesuya yain behedjik sivbu, yain v'shecha al teisht, and then it continues, ato v'necha v'lo samusu. The pasuk specifically says in Sefer Vayikra that if you have a Kohen, right, he said, right, don't drink wine or intoxicating drinks, and then you won't die, right? If you drink alcohol and you do the service in the temple when you're fashnikit, so you chayiv misa. And how do we know that the same thing applies to somebody who does the service in the temple with long hair? Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, v'rosham lo yigalechu ufer lo yishalechu, that they shouldn't completely shave their heads. They also shouldn't grow out their hair. That also the Kohanim should not be drinking any wine when they go to serve in the temple. And therefore we're comparing growing out your hair to drinking wine, right? To growing out your hair and doing the service in the temple, or to drinking wine and doing the service in the temple. And just like drinking, doing the service in the temple when you fashnik it, as the pasuk says, "Velo samusu," right? That make sure you stay sober lest you die. So therefore, also when it comes to growing out your hair, if you do the service in the temple with long hair, you taka chayev misa umina imashasuya yain demach leavoda. And therefore, just like if you if a Kohen who does a service in the temple when he's fashnikit, so the service does not count. So therefore, also a fellow who does the service in the temple with long hair, it also does not count. So Rav Ashi wanted to say that the reason why the Kohanim are allowed to grow out their hair nowadays is because at the end of the day, it's not the service that is done with long hair still works. However, we brought a kasha, a brisa that just says that that's not true. That just like if one does the service in the temple when he's fashnikit, so it doesn't count at all. So the same thing applies to long hair, that it won't count. So therefore it's a kasha and Rav Ashi who wanted to say that service ultimately done with long hair does count. So Ravina says to Rav Ashi, this whole comparison between growing out your hair and drinking wine came from a pasuk in Yechezkel, right? These are psukim in Yechezkel that compares the drinking wine and growing out your hair. And that's how we know that if you do the service and you grow out your hair, it doesn't work. You chayiv misa. Ravina asked Rav Ashi, how did they know this before Yechezkel came along and wrote that in the pasuk? What about before Yechezkel was there? Well, if a fellow did the service when he had long hair, was he chayiv misa? So Omerle. So Rav Ashi responds to Avinu, the time according to you, Hadamar of Chizah, that which of Chizah says, Moshe lo lamanu, that the following we didn't learn from Moshe, we learned it from Nevi'im, Kol benecha or leva or basu. The pasuk says in Yechezkel that any fellow who was not doing good deeds, right, he was being a nudnik, or he does not have a bris milah, lo yavo al mikdashi, should not come to my temple. But before Yechezkel came, how did you know that if you're a nudnik or you don't have a bris milah, you can't serve in the temple? Rather, it must be that B'meile, it was halacha Moshe Misinai that you can't be a nudnik, or that you have to have a bris milah in order to serve in the temple. When it comes to the halachas regarding a fellow with long hair serving in the temple, Gomer Gomerla, it's taka halacha Moshe Misinai. Yechezkel came and merely just provided a pasuk for it. Provided that which was already halacha Moshe Misinai. He wrote a pasuk for it to refer to it. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately halacha Moshe mi Sinai, that the fellow who has long hair should not be serving in the temple. Alrighty, continuing in the Mishnah. So the Mishnah had said that anything that's written in Megillas Taanis that you don't eulogize in that day, that's like a step up, right? There's like kind of two levels of holidays listed in Megillas Taanis. Some of them you simply don't fast on them. Others, not only do you not fast, you also don't eulogize. So any of those dates that are listed in Megillas Taanis has this higher level of a Yom Tiv, that not only do you not fast, you also don't eulogize. So the fun of Asr, also the day before you don't eulogize, L'achar Mutar, but the day afterwards you are allowed to eulogize. Tanu Rabban, the rabbis taught, Ilein Yomaya, these are the days, that we don't fast on those days, and on some days we don't even eulogize. From Rosh Chodesh Nisan V'atmanya Bein, till the 8th day of Nisan, Isukam Tmida Tlol Mispad Bahon. There was a machlokas with the Tzedukim about when the Baitusim, alright, about can an individual fellow offer a korban tamid, alright, or does it have to come from the congregation? And it was ultimately settled that it has to come from the congregation, not like the Baitusim who were saying that an individual can offer a korban tamid. Okay? Mitmanya Bey ad Sof Mo'ada, and then from the 8th day of Nisan until the end of Pesach, Isosuv Chagad Shavua D'Lo L'Misper Behod. So we don't eulogize in those days because Shavuos, the machlokus regarding Shavuos was settled. The Tzedukim would say that Shavuos has to always fall out on a Sunday, whereas the rabbis disagreed and said that Shavuos does not always have to fall out on a Sunday, and that was settled, and therefore we don't eulogize from the 8th day of of Nisan until after Pesach. All right, fine. I feel like when we were learning Masechta Pesachim, I kept on saying like the first day of Pesach when I meant Nisan. Amar Mai, we said earlier, Miresh Yarcha de Nisan, so from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, ad Tmanya Bey until the 8th day, Isukam Tmida de Lo L'Misped. Okay, so it was established that the Korban Tamid has to come from the congregation, and we don't fast on those days. Lamali Miresh Yarcha, how come this 8-day period needs to start from Rosh Chodesh? Lema Mitrei B'Nisan. Let's say from the 2nd day of Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Gufa Yom Tevu. And Rosh Chodesh itself is already a Yom Tov, so maybe you're not eulogizing on Rosh Chodesh. So shouldn't it be enough to just mention from days 2 to 8, not from days 1 to 8? So Amarav lo nitzuchai leso yom shelefanav. So says Rav, well, the point of saying from the first day of Nisan, even though it's already Rosh Chodesh, was so that it makes it clear that even the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you would not be eulogizing either. V'shelefanav nami typically dabale yom shlifnei Rosh Chodesh. So fact the Gemara, but still, even the day before, right, the last day of Adar, it's the day before Rosh Chodesh, so then they shouldn't be eulogizing anyways. So Rosh Chodesh the Oraisu lo bai chizik. So, well, Rosh Chodesh is Midoraisa, therefore we don't have to artificially strengthen it. So therefore, the day before Rosh Chodesh, you are allowed to eulogize. And by saying that on days 1 through 8 of Nisan, we don't eulogize because of this enactment based on the Korban Tamid, so therefore, we even wouldn't eulogize the day before Rosh Chodesh, and therefore by saying that days 1 through 8 are these special days, it means that already from the day before, you would not be eulogizing. Alright? The Taanis will learn in the Brisa, Hayom Ma'ela Aksum Megillas Taanis, that these days that are written in Megillas Taanis, Lifneim Ulachrei Nasurin, the day before them and after them is Osir. Okay? Mistama, that is like Rabbi Yossi, who says that the day before and the day afterwards are Osir, okay? When it comes to regular fast days. Shabbosos v'Yom Tovim hein asurin lifnei and v'lachrein mutarin. When it comes to Shabbos and Yom Tov, they are also the day before and the day afterwards are mutar. Ma'hefresh bin zelazeh. What's the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov and the other days? Halal divrei Torah v'divrei Torah ein tzrichin chizik. Halal divrei sovim v'divrei sovim tzrichin chizik. Very interesting. That while Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh are midoraisa, therefore you don't have to strengthen them, and therefore only Shabbos, only Yom Tov, right? Those are Asr, but the days before are mutter. Whereas these other days that are listed in Megillas Taanis are midirabanan, and therefore we have to give them extra strength. So the day before and the day afterwards would be you wouldn't be allowed to eulogize either. Friends, that was Daf Yud Zayin of Masechta Taanis. We learned about Kohanim nowadays, right? We said that according to Rebbe, the Kohanim are allowed to drink wine nowadays, and we don't actually have to be concerned that the Beis Mikdash is going to be rebuilt immediately, which is super interesting. The rabbis seem to argue upon that and say that Taka, Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine these days. And that's because they say that, look, the Beis Mikdash might be rebuilt any second, and we're going to need Kohanim to serve in the temple, and if they're off for shnikit, then they can't serve in the temple. We also learned about the haircut schedules of different notable people, like a king who gets a haircut every day, the Kohen Gadol would get a haircut every Friday, and the other Kohanim would get a haircut every 30 days. And at the end, we learned a shtickle about Megillas Taanis. Well, anyways, that was Daf Yud Zayin of Masechta Taanis. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.